Hi there. Sorry that we're not able to really formally meet on your first day of class, but in order to finish everything that we need to finish, you're just going to get started with your notes today. And today is going to be a review with distance formula, circles. We'll also bring in some midpoint formula. So you have on the top of your red packet that I handed out to you all of these formulas. So the distance formula is where we'll start. Midpoint formula we're going to be using at some point, and then equation of a circle is another thing that we're going to be working with. When we get into the equation of a circle, there are two more formulas that I didn't put on here that I'd like for you to add, please. Both of them I'm sure you're aware of. You've seen them before. It's not new. And one is that d over 2 equals r, where d is the diameter and r is the radius, and basically again that's just the diameter cut in half is the radius. Another formula that we are going to discuss that's in here, or you could use as an option, is the circumference, and the circumference is 2 pi times the radius. So that capital C stands for circumference, and r again is the radius on that one. So just add those two to your the bottom of your note sheet or somewhere on your note sheet. You're going to definitely want a calculator handy because we're going to be doing some calculations. There'll be points in the video where I stop and pause and give you time to do some work, and then we'll come back and regroup or revisit. If anything is confusing or causes a question or you're not sure about, just please make sure that you make note of it, and then we'll talk about it in class again the next day when I meet you actually more formally. So 1-1, circles and distance formula is what we're going to be working on. Distance formula off of your formula sheet is distance is equal to the square root of x2 minus x1 quantity squared plus y2 minus y1 quantity squared. These are subscripts. Focus this a little bit better. Those are subscripts underneath x2, x1, y2, y1, and that just means I'm talking about two different x values, and they come from the points. Like, for instance, if I called this the first point, that would be x1, y1, and I called this next one the second point, that would be x2, y2. I could change this up if I was feeling real spicy or something. I could call this x2, y2, and the second one x1, y1. But I'm just going to keep it basic right now. I'm just going to start my first point listed as my first point, x1, y1. My second point listed as my second point, x2, y2. And I'll go ahead and plug that into the formula. So I would have my distance is equal to the square root of negative 18 minus 3 quantity squared plus 10 minus 25 quantity squared. When I do my simplifying, I will get negative 21 squared plus negative 15 squared. Bring that over. I will end up with, plug this in your calculator or do it by hand, however you need to do it. Just keep in mind that if you do plug it in your calculator, please make sure that you put parentheses around the negative 21, and the square will go on the outside. Otherwise, a lot of the calculators won't square the negative, it'll only square the 21, and that can pose a problem when you're working, especially with radicals, because it might come up with a value that in your calculator will be a syntax error. But anyways, you do your 21 squared, negative 21 squared, you get 441 plus negative 15 squared is 225. So I have the square root of 666. When I see a radical form and I'm working with the distance formula, often I like to put it in simplest radical form, meaning I want to take out any perfect squares that are in there. And one approach to taking out perfect squares, and this is by no means the only way to do it, if you were taught a different way, do whatever works best for you, but one way is by doing repeated division. So I'm going to take that value that I get under there and I'm just going to see start by putting in the smallest number that I can think of that can go in there other than 1. And so 2 can go into 666. And then I keep dividing. 2 doesn't go into 333, but 3 does. 2 doesn't go into 111, but 3 does. And then 37 is a prime number, so I stop. So what I end up with here is 2 times 3 times 3 times 37. And for every 2 that I find under the radical, I can take 1 out. So I end up with 3 times the square root of 2 times 37, which is 74. So my final answer, 3 times the square root of 74, would be my simplest radical form. Some of you, depending on the calculator that you have, you might have that option. It does it in simplest radical form for you. It sure isn't a terrible thing for you to practice going through the steps of simplifying a radical, especially if you're going on in math. But if you have a calculator that does it for you, I guess more power to you. So let's run through the next one the same way. In fact, what I'll do is, this is a place where I'll pause the video and I'll let you guys work through it, and then when you're done, pause the video as well, and when you're done, click it back on and then check your answer as you go. And welcome back. It turns out on this one I got the square root of 233, and when I tried to pull stuff out of there, I can't find any pairs. 233, it may be divisible by something, but I'm not able to find any perfect squares that are in there, any repeated values that go in. So my final answer on that one is just the square root of 233. So just remember, if you can simplify, please put it in simplest radical form. If you can't, then you can leave it under the radical, and that's fine as well. When I do my work, sometimes I show more work in my notes than I necessarily would on my homework, or on, if I were doing this for myself. And so I suggest that on the notes you try to get as much information down as you can so you can look back at it and it's helpful. But when it comes time to do your homework, feel free to take some shortcuts, skip some steps, whatever you need to do. Again, the end result is what we're looking for. Moving on to the circle portion, we're going to be writing the standard form of an equation for a circle, and that standard form is x minus h quantity squared plus y minus k quantity squared equals r squared, where h comma k is the center and r is the radius. The thing that I have to remember is that I'm using r squared, and sometimes when they give me all of the pieces of information, the center and the radius, all I need to do is plug it into the formula. So this is my h and my k, and my r are given. I would write this as x minus 9 quantity squared plus y minus negative 13 quantity squared. Remember, minus a negative is plus a positive, equals r squared. Don't forget that this is r squared, so I have to take whatever I get there and square it. That's 9. So this would be my final form. It would obviously be lovely if they were all that easy, but they're not going to be all that easy. Sometimes we're going to have to do a little bit more work, but we're going to base all our work off of this equation of a circle. We're also going to have to use the midpoint formula at some point as well. So moving on to the next one, you see that's a problem where I am not given the radius, but instead I'm given the center and a point on the circle. So if I picture what's going on, the center and a point on the circle, my center would be 13, negative 5, and the point on the circle is 16, 0. I sometimes just draw a picture just to give me an idea of what it looks like. I do know that from the center to the point on the circle is my radius, and so I could find the distance, or use the distance formula to find the radius. But since I'm using this equation of a circle and I happen to have the center, I have h and k, and I also have an x and a y, I can just plug them into this formula to find my r squared. And that's a kind of quick, easy way to do it. So I would do x minus h quantity squared plus y minus k quantity squared equals r squared. So I've got it to a point where I have only one variable. I'll get 3 squared plus 5 squared equals r squared. So 9 plus 25 is r squared. So my final is 34 is r squared. Now what I have to remember is that this is just my radius squared, and I need to write the equation of a circle. So even though I feel like I've done a lot of work, I'm not quite done with this problem yet, because all I've done is found r squared. I don't need to go back and find r. I want to use r squared because that's what the formula of the circle is. So I'll go back to my center and my radius squared and put those all in. So this becomes x minus 13 quantity squared plus y minus negative 5 quantity squared equals r squared. And that's my final answer on that particular problem. This is another place where I'd like you to take an opportunity to pause the video for a moment and give number 5 a try in the same way that we did the previous one, and then we'll come back and revisit it shortly. So welcome back again. Hopefully you worked through this. I did the same way that I did on the last problem. I set up my circle just to get a visual. I knew what my radius was, but I used the equation of the circle to guide me through here. I ended up with a radius squared of 61. I don't need to take the square root and find the radius because I'm going to be using the radius squared in the formula for a circle. So when I put it in the equation of a circle, I could rewrite this one as x minus 9 squared plus y squared, because obviously y minus 0 is just y, equals 61. And in fact, if you ever do a multiple choice test, which we do on occasion in here, it would be in the simplest form that you could get. Okay? Moving on, there are going to be situations that are going to be even a little bit more challenging. So far we've seen problems where I have the center and the radius given, or the center and a point on the circle given, but what if I'm given endpoints of the diameter? And so that would look like in a picture, I have these 2 points on the circle. I don't really need to be too careful about where I put them. I just need this circle as sort of a dummy circle to help me label the things that I need. So I have those 2 points on the circle. That's a diameter, and a diameter runs through the center. The center is missing on this particular problem, and if I'm going to be using my x minus h quantity squared plus y minus k quantity squared equals r squared, I need to know the center hk, and that's where the midpoint formula comes into play. So on your note sheet, one of the formulas that we're given is the midpoint formula, and that is, midpoint is x2 plus x1 divided by 2, comma, y2 plus y1 divided by 2. Basically, it's the average of my x's and the average of my y's. Please be careful when you're doing this on a calculator. If you're going to be plugging in the calculator, make sure that you do x2 plus x1 hit equals, or put them in parentheses before you divide by 2. Otherwise, it'll only divide the last number by 2. So sometimes we have errors in our calculations that are just kind of human error. So I'm going to plug those in. That's 1 plus negative 2. My midpoint is 1 plus negative 2 divided by 2, and negative 19 plus negative 13 divided by 2, or negative 1/2, comma, negative 16 when I do the math on that. Negative 19 plus negative 13 is negative 32, Negative 32 divided by 2 is negative 16. Once I get that, again, I can go through and use this, but now I have 2 points that I could choose from, and it really doesn't matter which point you choose. I'm just going to pick the first one to work with. No particular reason why I did that. Sometimes I pick the easiest one. It doesn't really matter. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug that in with the center, because this is my h and my k now, and this will be my x and my y. And I'll plug that into the center to find r squared. So I'm adding on more steps as I go. So now I had to find the center, but now I still have to find r squared. And then once I get everything I need, then I can put it all together in my equation. So I will have negative 2 minus negative 1/2 squared plus negative 13 minus negative 16 squared equals r squared. So I'm just using the information that I found as my h and k with one of the points. That'll leave me with negative 3/2 squared plus 3 squared equals r squared. That gives 9/4 plus 9 equals r squared. And it's not my job to teach you how to do fractions, so if you are not comfortable with them, please go ahead, feel free to use your calculator, the fraction key on your calculator, to work your way through this. But this is 9/4 plus 36/4. That leaves me with 45/4 for r squared. Again, I feel like I've done a ton of work, but I'm not done yet, because I have to put it into the final equation of a circle. That's what I wanted to do, the equation of a circle. Now I've got the center, I had to find that. I've got the radius squared, I had to find that. Now I'll put it together in my equation. X minus negative 1/2 squared plus y minus negative 16 squared equals r squared. Again, then this would be my final answer. Again, we're going to take the opportunity for you to pause the video and go try the next one on your own in a similar way. Remember, you're finding the center, finding the radius squared, and then putting it together in your equation of your circle. Once you're done, just unpause the video and check and see how you did. So I ended up with x minus 6 quantity squared plus y minus 13 quantity squared equals 32. I hope that you ended up with the same thing. In our last couple problems, sometimes they're going to even look like they're a little more complicated than they really are. And so in the last two, I'll be given the center and then the circumference. When I'm given the circumference, and that's where the formula of the circumference is very helpful, knowing that if I'm given the circumference, then I know that my circumference, which is equal to 2 pi r, holds the radius in it. So my 4 pi is equal to 2 pi r. All I have to do is a little bit of algebra, divide that 2 pi out. And 4 pi divided by 2 pi is 2. Now I get my radius. Remember, though, that I need to do the radius squared when I plug it into my formula, so I'll be using 4. So this would be x plus 4, because minus negative 4 quantity squared, plus y plus 15 equals 4 for the final answer. And again, if I look at another similar problem to that, I have this last one. My circumference looks even more difficult. But again, if I remember what a circumference is 2 pi times the radius. If I divide the 2 pi out, I get the square root of 37 equal to r. But again, remember that I need r squared, so r squared is 37. When you square a radical, you lose the radical. So the square root of 37 times the square root of 37 is 37. I can put it in the equation of the circle. X minus negative 10 quantity squared plus y minus 0 quantity squared equals 37. Or better than that, x plus 10 squared plus y squared equals 37 as my final answer. Now, as for homework, you got your homework packet in the information that I gave you last week. And so that in that homework, you'll notice that it's a full packet. you need to look at the part that is 1.1, and you need to do evens or odds. I don't care what you choose to do, evens or odds. Just pick which one that you want to do. It's not both. I'm not saying do half. When you look at this, it's not like, oh, I'm really good at this kind, so I'm going to do 1 through 6 and call it a day, or 1 through 7 and call it a day. No, you need to pick evens or odds. That gives you a sampling of each type of problem that you have to do. So what you have is 7 total problems that you need to work on for homework. If you notice that the last couple problems are review on factoring, it says solve each equation by factoring. So just as a quick refresher, and we can talk more about this in class when we meet tomorrow, but keep in mind that you have to get everything on one side, get it in terms of equals 0. You want ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. And then when you factor, some of you might maybe use the snowflake method. Remember, where it's ac on top, b on the bottom, and then you do ax and ax. You'll do some simplifying there, but you're looking for two numbers that multiply to be the top, add to be the bottom when you go through. And then each of those things that you get, like this would be something that goes in parentheses, this would be something that goes in parentheses. Each of those sets up two little mini equations that you have to solve to get your answer. So you're going to get two answers, x equals something and x equals something else, when you're working through these. So again, make sure that you get everything on one side, and then however you do. Some people will do guess and check, some of you will do that snowflake method. If you have another method that you learned throughout your years, that's fine as well. If it's been a while since you factored, then hold off on those. We'll go over those in class together tomorrow. Just give them a try. If you have any questions, again, you can definitely ask in class tomorrow, and I look forward to meeting you all then. Have a great one.